are certainly people who can't be here every week, and so that's why we're doing the videotape. And should this not work, Peggy, what I will do is just videotape what I'm gonna say tonight at home and post it. So it'll be
Oh, okay.
online one way or another. So there's a very low pressure.
So
sort
when
of-
should I turn it on?
Now.
I did. Just checking.
So, as I mentioned to some of you, over the last few days, I've been taking the newspaper and clipping out all of the religion-related articles, and it's quite amazing how many areas in life are touched by religion. Especially, we've had a lot of things just in the past few days, but there's, stuff going on with the Pope and stuff going on in Israel and France, and, it's a very important political, social, cultural, personal phenomenon. And that's one of the things that has fascinated me about this, in addition to it being a spiritual quest, I would say, for me, for many, many years. So I titled this Believe It or Not, because we're going to be talking about a lot of traditions, and some of them we may connect with on a belief level, and others we may not. But I think that's not the point necessarily. It's more about just learning and opening our minds. And as you know, I was born and raised as a Christian, a Lutheran Christian, and converted to Judaism. But I've also been very influenced in my spirituality by Native American traditions as well as Buddhism. I think I've drawn from a variety of traditions in my own development and understanding. And I know others here too have been, had a lot of wonderful experiences growing, in a sense, through other traditions. You did it! Did you know that you are my hero? All right, so if we could just, go around and just introduce ourselves. If you want to say something, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
I'm Peggy, and I've been a friend of Gail's for a long, long time, and I was raised Catholic. So that'll explain a few things.
I'm Diane, and I'm a friend of Gail's from our exercise class. And I was raised Presbyterian. My husband had a French Catholic mother, and a Jewish father, but his father died when he was very young, so the Catholics took over.
My name's Steve Lindberg, and I'm a childhood friend and high school classmate of Gail's. She and I graduated from the same high school in the same small town. I was raised Catholic, and at one time I was seriously considered being a priest. And then I drew on the Baptist faith for many years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And now I'm a Lutheran.
Holy
So-
smokes.
I like to say I'm just kind of spread myself around.
Equal opportunity.
You bet. And this is very interesting, because this is the first synagogue I've ever been in, so this is very interesting to me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
One of the best ones, so you start.
Yeah, you started at the top, that's right. That's right. If you ever want to come to services, you're welcome to do that too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you
but
very much.
be aware that the rabbi may actually recruit you to help with things.
Yeah, he does. He does tend to
He
drop
does
you.
Army-style recruiting, you'll feel right at home.
And I'm Sharon. I know Gail. She's a friend of mine from the synagogue. I was raised Jewish and continue to practice that faith.
We have a wonderful Jewish family and grandchildren now, and
Oh,
Yep.
all of you here, and many of us are members of the synagogue.
yeah, that's right.
And my name is Sal, and also a member here, and raised Jewish, and member here at the synagogue for the last 15 years. And great place to be.
Yep.
Get cute, dear, get cute.
Hi, I'm Rex. I was raised Army,
Oh, were you really? Okay.
but you might be able to appreciate that. I was raised Army. I'm an Army brat. And that meant that we didn't mention that we were Jewish, because that was no way to get a promotion. this country's military in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. Okay, it wasn't. So that was just basically ignored. So when I got much older, I started spending more time with my grandparents and summers with my grandparents, which had a very quiet but determined version of Judaism. And so when I got into college, I spent a lot more time studying and a lot of other religions.
Yep, that's wonderful.
So,
Yep,
and yep, here I am.
here you are.
Yeah, I still didn't get over the military.
No, whenever he's stressed, he goes to parade rest. That's how you can tell he's stressed.
Does he click his heels and everything?
No, no.
Only if I want to go home really badly.
Click them 3
It's not
times.
Kansas anymore, is it?
I'm Jane. I was born nominally Jewish, raised in a family where there was bacon and eggs or lox on Sunday breakfast. Never saw the inside of the synagogue till I was 10. And then mortified my parents. Well, anyway, kind of went through a flirtation with Christianity. Got to the Minnesota from the East Coast because I thought I had called the ministry, which turned out to be a wrong number. And then went back to my roots far enough that my mother is absolutely mortified because I keep a kosher kitchen. I'm with him.
And you left out the subject.
Yeah, I spent a year in Israel in 1971, 72, including 6 months on a religious kibbutz, which happened to be the largest producer of carrots for export in the country. And by the time I got home, I couldn't look a carrot in the face for about 6 feet.
Go carrots.
Well, we had 3 kinds of carrots, 3 meals a day. I'm sorry. It's a miracle I didn't come home orange.
That's true.
And I've got 5 kids, one of whom with his new wife is a member of the SOL. And the other 3 of whom do what they do and sometimes show up. And Rafi is our youngest.
Martha.
It's mine and ours.
My name is Martha, and I was raised Jewish, and somewhere around, sometime in my teens, I was interested in Catholicism, and which totally freaked my parents out. And I'm not sure, looking back on it, what was going on in my, 14-year-old head, but whatever it was, my parents were very upset about it. In fact, they wouldn't let me go out of town to college because they were afraid I'd convert.
Oh.
And when I got into college, the whole, there must have been some, I went to Brooklyn College, and there must have been something in the air, and I suddenly realized that I didn't believe in anything anymore. And there was a long period of time when I didn't particularly. I did spend a year in Israel in 63, 64. I kind of went there by accident, and was so fascinated by it that I stayed for a year. And I consider myself a Jubu, which is a Jewish Buddhist. I'm also a member of a Sangha, although I haven't been there lately, and I'm a member of this synagogue.
Lovely.
I'm Steve Zion, and I was raised Jewish, and I met my wife at the Jewish Center at the University Hillel House over there, and sometime after I got out of college, I wasn't quite doing a lot of practicing Jewish stuff for quite a few years, and then we joined the synagogue about 4 years ago, and getting back into it. And that's kind of where I'm at.
I love the fact that we've all, we have journeys in our life. I mean, some of us have been on the same kind of path from the beginning, others have done explorations of different directions, but it's good to learn. Now, I just want to do a couple of housekeeping details here. After this week, we're going to start on time. We're going to end on time. I think that's respectful. So we'll go from 7 to 8:30. And what we're gonna do is the first hour will be presentation, and the last half hour we'll do more discussion and questions. Just so we can kind of get through the material, since we're videotaping it for those who are not gonna be able to be here at all or not able to be here every week. So there is actually someone who's never gonna be here, but is gonna do it strictly through videotape. So, and since we're videotaping, if you will arrive later, have to leave early, be a little sneaky. And we're gonna cover a lot of material. My subtitle for this was an inspiring romp through the world of religions. And really, we are gonna be romping because we're gonna be covering a lot of different traditions. And the way it's gonna work, I have a schedule here. And you'll see how things are organized. Probably have too many of them.
The same one I got handed.
Yeah, you got one last night, yep.
Okay.
So tonight is gonna be strictly introductory material. I had intended next week to start with indigenous traditions because that just logically made sense to me. But our teacher of Lakota spirituality couldn't be here before February 4th. So I thought, okay, I'll do Judaism next week. And then the following week, I'm gonna do an introduction to indigenous traditions generally. And then we'll have Ed McGaw, who's, as many of you have heard, is a very well-known, I mean, he teaches all over the world, so we're just amazingly lucky to have him here. And he is a character. You will enjoy him. Then we're gonna do a couple weeks on Buddhism, the same idea, where the first week I will do an introduction, kind of the founding, the history, some of the basic teachings and principles. And then a Buddhist teacher by the name of Busho Lan from the Minneapolis Zen Center will really talk about what for him it means to be a Buddhist and a Buddhist teacher, and how does that impact his life? How do they view other traditions? You know, kind of that on rubber hits the road, what does it mean to be a Zen Buddhist? We will do the same with Hinduism. I'm still waiting to hear who my Hindu teacher is going to be. And then Christianity, we'll do 2 weeks on, and Reverend Jo Ersfeld, who was supposed to be here tonight. I don't know what happened to her, just to kind of check it out. She'll be teaching Christianity, and then we have a Sufi Muslim teacher who will come in to do our final week, which will be fascinating. I have a great fondness for Sufis. I taught religion in Chicago for many years at a college, and also at synagogues and churches and other places, and I had a good relationship with a Sufi center there, and they're the mystics, really, of Islam. And so I have a kind of a more softer, opener approach, but certainly will be also knowledgeable about Islam in a broader sense. We're not going to be focusing really on current events in Judaism, although as you see this huge number of articles, I offer these as an invitation or a challenge to you to, as we're going through this, pay more attention to what's going on in the news that touches on religion. And how is it portrayed? How is it talked about? What are the issues? Does this sound like it portrays the average person of that tradition, or are they talking about the fanatics? You know, what percentage of people in any given tradition are fanatics? Because there's every tradition has a fanatical element, and someday I'm going to write a book about the commonality of fanatics, because they could have their own sort of tradition. You know what I'm saying? They have much more in common with each other than they do with the non-fanatical. You think that's true?
Oh, yeah.
It's one of my theories anyway. So we're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus more on the reality of the traditions, the basis of the traditions, and how they're lived out in more normal life, we might say, today. I don't want this to be an exercise in argumentation. We're not going to be arguing about religions. I'm certainly going to try to avoid offending anybody. And if I do, let me know afterwards. But that's not the point. It's really to just open our minds and open our hearts and learn as much as we can. So, the first and also, another thing I want to say as we go through this, not only examining the news, but your own beliefs, presuppositions, not only of your own tradition, but how you view other traditions, okay? So the first thing we're going to talk about tonight, after welcome, is what is religion? So the what question, which is really not a very easy question to answer, and why do we want to be interested in religion? We touched on that a little bit already. Now, one of the ways that I've found to touch on the question of what is religion, I mean, it seems like one of those questions that should be really have an obvious answer to it. We all sort of know it. But there is, I think, a purpose behind all religious traditions that we can find in the word religion itself. Now, this actually goes back to Latin, of course, as many of our words do. As it's used now, it talks about a specific set of beliefs, practices, symbols, rituals that define a group of people that have a commonly agreed upon tradition, right? That most generally springs from an original spiritual teacher. There's a spiritual genius, we might say, behind every tradition. Now, how those develop over time is another matter. Look at the word religion, the root. Okay? Now, Steve could ask his nurse wife about the prefix leg. Steve, you've got medical training. What's a ligament?
Oh, yeah, that's it's like a rubber band that sort of goes between a couple of points and holds things together.
It connects things together.
Yeah.
It actually connects unlike it connects muscle to bone in the body. So it connects two unlike substances in the body. It's a connector. All right? So if we think about the word religion having its root in this sort of a connecting principle, we could say the purpose behind religion is to connect us to the spiritual, to God, to whatever name you want to give to that reality that exists beyond our normal everyday reality. All right? And not only does religion connect us theoretically to this spiritual realm, it connects us to each other, right? At least to those who are adherents of the same group. Now, unfortunately, it also can have the opposite effect, right? It can make us xenophobic, in terms of people who are not of our group, fearful and excluding. But the idea is to connect. So it connects us upwards, it connects us to each other, and I believe it also connects us to ourself at a deep level. I think we're all spiritual beings, or we all have a spiritual potential. And the purpose of religion is to open that up, connect that, grow that, and ultimately to connect us to that which is beyond us. I've got some actual definitions here that come from some of my favorite religious books that I've used in teaching. One of my favorites is by William James, The Varieties of Religious Experience, which is amazing. An amazing, amazing text. Study of Human Nature, definitely worth reading. Another of my favorites is by Houston Smith, who is a famous writer on mythology and religion, called The World's Religions. It's called An Anthology of Living Religions. This is actually the text I used when I taught. And this gives actually readings from all of the different traditions, which can be very illuminating. And this is called Religion in America, which is specifically about, obviously, religions that are unique to America. Now, today I was talking to one of my colleagues at work who is a Quaker. He's a Quaker, he's a hospice spiritual counselor, but he comes out of the Quaker tradition. He said, what you should do when you're done with this series of classes, because people are gonna want more, he said, I'll come in and I'll talk about the historic peace traditions, which is like Quakerism, the Mennonites, and one other, I can't remember. And I said, yeah, and we could talk about Jehovah's Witness and Scientology and, you know, some of those fun things. But that could be kind of Mormonism. But anyway, so if anybody's interested in these books, I would highly recommend them, and you can take a look at them if you want to know more. So, one of the definitions that I came up from my readings and studies is a belief in a deity and a practice of worship, action, or thought related to that deity. Now, all religious traditions have some sort of a sense of something greater than us. Buddhism doesn't have a God, certainly, but there is an ultimate reality. So when I taught religions, rather than using the term God, and I really like this, I use the term ultimate reality. We called it, for my college students, we called it the you are. They thought that was really cool. So I think that's a way of talking. I mean, for a lot of people, God is a very loaded term. You say God and you have an image of, you know, a dude on a throne or, you know, something like that, a masculine image, a hierarchical image for some people. But just the sense that there is something beyond us that we can't perceive directly. Indirectly, yeah, absolutely. I think you only have to go outside on a beautiful day or a not so beautiful day. So, religion, any system, there's generally a code of ethics, values, beliefs associated with particular religious traditions. Now, those of you who have studied religions, are the ethics and values pretty similar across traditions?
Yes.
I think they are.
They are, absolutely, absolutely. If you get to the bottom line of every tradition has some version of love your neighbor as yourself. I used to have a poster of that from different traditions, stated in different ways, but that basic idea of kindness, generosity, you know. Now we can look at how traditions are lived out, and they're not necessarily lived out according to the basic ethical values that are at the heart of their teachings. We all know that. If that were the case, there never would have been an inquisition. There, you know, never would have been pogroms in Russia. There would never be militants blowing people up. But traditions do have a code of ethics, values, and belief. And usually the questions that are dealt with by religious traditions are along the lines of, where did we come from? Every tradition has a creation story. Every tradition also has a flood story. Interesting. I did a seminar one time on flood stories across traditions. It's fascinating when you start looking at it. It makes you think, there was a flood. Seriously. But the ways it's interpreted, the myth that has developed in the different traditions around these, it's really, really interesting. There's one where a monkey insulted a tree or something like that, and that caused the flood. Anyway. So there are these ways of making meaning of life. Where did we come from? What's our ultimate destiny? All right. I don't think there are religious traditions that say there's nothing after this life. Has anybody ever heard of one? There are many people within Judaism who think that, but that's certainly not the teaching of the Torah or the Talmud. Most people probably, if you took people across the world, well, an awful lot of people believe in reincarnation.
All aspects of Judaism believe in reincarnation.
Kabbalah?
too. Yeah.
I do. I don't know if I believe in it. I think it's a fascinating theory that I think might be right. But yeah, definitely, there's been times in Jewish history where most people were more in the Kabbalistic vein and believed in Gilgul, which is the Hebrew word for reincarnation. So, another thing we think about in life is what's our duty? What are we supposed to do? Why are we here? What's the point of this? And really, those are questions that can be very helpful to people. If you live without a sense of any ultimate meaning beyond this life, things can get kind of shallow. I've been working in hospice for a long time. And I've been with a lot of people who come to the ends of their lives. And I don't ever hear anyone regretting spending time with their families or doing acts of kindness or relaxing or reading too many books. But people who basically have spent their life in materialistic pursuits, there's regrets, especially if they've neglected relationships. Relationships are what it's all about. It's all about connections and healthy connections with ourselves, with what's beyond us, and with each other. And that is the goal of religion, in my theory, my philosophy of it. What's the meaning of suffering? Now, there's another good question to ponder that is often addressed by religious traditions in
I
vastly
think
different.
Catholics have cornered
Catholics
the market
are
on that
big
one.
on suffering. It's a good thing.
Cornered it.
But a lot of traditions will say there can be meaning derived from suffering. That we can learn and become better people through it, but yeah. But as an end in itself, I think Roman Catholicism does have more of an emphasis on that, certainly than other traditions, which is another whole story. There is the book I pointed out before, The Varieties of Religious Experience. William James says that anytime we try and define religion, we end up simplifying a very complicated phenomenon. So true. I mean, religion in itself is trying to talk about something you can't really even talk about. And so when we try to talk about that thing that's trying to talk about things that you can't even talk about, it gets to become doubly and triply complicated. Now, James, in his book, he's more interested in studying the religious experience of individuals rather than the mass, beliefs of systems. So that, I think for someone who's a psychologist by training, that could be really, have you read that? Have you read The Varieties of Religious Experience?
Me?
Yeah, kind of a classic.
Actually, I read it in undergraduate school. I don't remember what class it was assigned in, so I read it a long
It's a
time
classic.
ago, and it is a classic, and I actually have it on my, one of my e-readers. I was thinking of rereading it, and you're talking about it.
There you go. It's a sign. It's a sign, Martha.
Is that what it is? Uh-oh.
We look for signs.
Any excuse will do.
Actually, I just reread it not too long ago either. He defined religion as belief in an unseen order and the belief that our supreme good lies in harmoniously adjusting ourselves thereto. So belief in this and having a good relationship, probably not a bad idea. Houston Smith, one of the other authors, said that the ideal role of religion in human culture is this, and I love this. Enlargement of one's understanding of the ultimate nature of things. Enlargement of one's understanding of the ultimate nature of things. Like what's really real, what's really true behind what appears to be true. Very platonic. Now, world religions, some kind of religious belief is virtually universal. You look at cultures, we're going to talk about indigenous cultures. Every culture has something that you could identify as a religious or a spiritual tradition. Now, you go back in time, there was not a concept of secular and religious. There was no, that distinction wouldn't even have made sense. Because the religious or the spiritual was just such an aspect of life. It simply was how life was lived out in this particular group. And we can even see that in the I think the history of Judaism. There was no word in Judaism for religion. There's just nothing separate from the rest of life. It's simply an aspect of how life is lived out. Now, that changed for us, people, with the Enlightenment, with the rise of science, when people started investigating the nature of things, you might say. Early on, the early really days of science, like Newton, Isaac Newton said that God is at the center of everything. So he really had that kind of a sense of this, I'm studying all these things, but what I'm studying is really how God does things and what God does. But then there came the time within our human understanding that said, if we can measure something, if we can see it, if we can investigate it, if we can touch it, that's the natural world, the material world, okay? That's what's real. Everything else became known as supernatural, which over time took on the connotation of not real, not really real. That the only things that have meaning, in a sense, are the things that we can measure. Everything else is open to question. So, this really says that our belief in some kind of an ultimate reality was supplanted by a belief in science. Right? That changed very much the way we look at life and the way we look at religion and spirituality. There's two realms, right? There's the sacred, there's the secular. And they're not always very well integrated for people. Now, we're going to talk more about this later, but one of the largest rising groups of people who identify themselves as having any kind of a particular tradition, religious set of kind of identifiers, is the spiritual, not religious category, right? You've all read about that. Protestant Christianity has lost about 5% over the last 8-9 years. Catholicism has dropped by about 1%. People who actively identify themselves as Jewish, I can't find that right now, but it's definitely dropped. Most traditions have decreased. The only one that's really grown is the spiritual, not religious category. Now, some people look at that and, kind of bemoan it, that people are moving away from traditions, moving away from the organized religion that has been the kind of center of life for a long time.
Is that worldwide, or is that?
These are U.S., this is Pew Research study.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because you go to Africa,
Yeah.
this is the United States. Well, Europe has been secular for so long. I mean, people don't even, there's beautiful churches and nobody goes to them, but I think a lot of people there would in some way identify themselves as spiritual, but certainly not religious. Now, I read one commentator who said, maybe what we're actually doing is returning to the old ways of integrating our spirituality with our life. This whole idea of being spiritual but not religious. I thought that's an interesting idea, of stepping away from the organized religion that has become so institutionalized and hierarchical that it really seems separate from life for a lot of people. I don't know. That was just a theory that I read that I thought was kind of interesting.
Question.
Yes, dear.
On looking at the United States, I wonder, putting on the lawyer hat, how much of the strict separation between the sacred and the secular follows directly from the Constitution, because so many of the people who came to the United States because they were of a minority religion in the place they came from that was being persecuted by the state religion.
Well, I bet the whole idea, yeah, of course.
And so that's how the whole concept of separation of church and state.
But that, of course, comes out of the Enlightenment view of,
Yeah, it comes out of the Enlightenment view, but it also comes out of just the fact that so many people came here to avoid being prevented from practicing their own beliefs where they came from. And so, you know, at that point, you almost have to have the sacred.
well, there's a lot of people who say the United States is a Christian country.
And they don't know anything about the
Well,
founding of the United States.
So, that's another topic we're not going to get off on
Yeah.
today. But, so, let's talk about the characteristics of a religion. So we already said that a religion involves a belief in a deity of some sort, one or more. I had a very interesting conversation, was that last week? One of my patients is Hindu. She was a professor of religious philosophy in India before she came over here to live with her son. And they had a Swami visiting them, a very prominent Hindu teacher. And I got to spend an hour sitting with this Swami, he was wearing a long orange robe, just the color of Steve's sign there, and was sitting on the couch barefooted with his legs crossed. I mean, just what, beard, And, it was fascinating talking to him. And one of the questions I asked of him is, and we'll talk about this more when we get to Hinduism, but when a lot of people look at Hinduism with the 330 some major deities that they have in their practice, people look at that and think that you mistake them in a sense for God, that you're worshiping them. And he said, oh, no, we see through them. And what we see through them is what we would call God. That these are just manifestations for us of what it is that stands behind them. I thought that was a really helpful way. We see through them to what stands behind them. I think you could talk a lot of religious symbolism that way. That we see through that. I mean, our Torah, that's a powerful religious symbol for Jews, Is the Torah an end in itself? Or do we see through it to what stands behind it, the meaning that stands behind it? Oh, this man is a genius. I wish he could come here, but he's going back to Dallas. Anyway, the other thing that he said that I thought was really interesting, he said, I want you to tell your people, beware of religious tolerance. Now, we usually look at that as a virtue. And he said he's been on many interreligious panels in his day. And he always has the sense, when they start talking about religious tolerance, it's from a position of kind of a hierarchical position. Like, I will tolerate you. I'm such a high-minded person that I will tolerate you and your beliefs. I don't really accept you. I'm not really seeking to understand you. I'm not really seeking to learn from you, but I'm willing to tolerate you. I'd never thought about it in that way. So I promised him I would say that. I have given the Swami his due. Now I think that's a point to ponder, because we do hear a lot about religious tolerance. And there's something to be said about that, I think. I think he has a good point. All right, so religion, belief in a deity, a set of beliefs that over time are codified and written in books, that talk about, as we said before, a way of understanding the world, the meaning of life, various ethical traditions. So we have the ethics and moral principles. For example, the 10 Commandments, which are common, of course, to Jews and Christians because it comes out of the Hebrew Bible, right? Which really are a beautiful shorthand guide to life if people actually followed that. I think Gandhi said that if there was one person in the world who actually lived as a Christian, he'd become one. And I think you could say that about any set of beliefs. If we'd actually live by those principles, it would be paradise. It would be back to the Garden of Eden, right?
I think C.S. Lewis said something to the effect that it's not that Christianity, he was talking about Christianity, obviously, but it's not that Christianity has been tried and it's failed, it's that it hasn't been tried.
Yeah. And we don't want to pick on Christianity because you could say the same thing. I mean, the ethical principles of Christianity are Judaism, really.
Yeah.
It's the same, it's got the same basis. All right, so religions also have buildings, they have clergy, teachers, administrators, so, they're structural. Sacred writings, scriptures, teachings, now not all have written traditions, but oral, right? I mean, most of the older traditions came from the oral tradition. I mean, certainly Judaism, Christianity, they were all oral traditions, Hinduism, Buddhism. Religious arts, music, poetry, visual art, full of symbolic meaning. Some used for meditative purposes. Ritual practices, obviously, worship services, holidays, sacred activities of various sorts. Certainly we see some of those holidays, which were religious in origin, have become secular, right? I mean, there are many people who celebrate Christmas who don't do so in a spiritual way, and we say that of other traditions too, I'm sure. Religions have symbols and myths. And we'll talk about those as we go through the traditions. What are the symbols and what do they mean? History, culture, foods. Remember one time I was teaching in Chicago, I was teaching a Jewish group. I don't even remember what my topic was. It may have been my own journey. I went through a spell where everybody wanted me to talk about my journey to Judaism. It was like they were real interested in that. And so I was talking about what it was in Judaism that attracted me. And I said, it's a spiritual path for me. It's solely, culturally, I'm Scandinavian. I didn't come to Judaism for the gefilte fish, was my joke. I have lutefisk, it's so much worse already, right? But I asked people, what is it that you find most meaningful, and these were all Jewish people, about Judaism, and it was the food, the family, the holidays. It wasn't, nobody said the connection with God or the spiritual path or anything, which I was kind of struck by. I didn't point it out to them because I didn't want to, but I pointed out to you. So, can you think of any other characteristics of religion that I've missed? Any other aspects or dimensions beyond? That kind of covers probably the broad range of it.
We need to talk about it as community.
Community, yeah, that's right. And that is very important. I've got to add that to my list. Because that is, for a lot of people, if you say what's important to you about your tradition, it's the community. I love coming to this show every Saturday because I love the community here. It's wonderful. I have great friends here and nice people. And
it also can drive people away.
Oh yeah,
Into a
absolutely.
community.
Yeah, that's right. There are many communities that aren't that are divided or, this is an unusually
welcoming, yeah.
friendly place.
Well, I think that maybe one of the differences between the spiritual but not religious and the religious is that you can sit on top of your mountain wherever you are and be spiritual but not religious. However, there is some level of community, even if you're not quote-unquote affiliated, as soon as you start talking about espousing a religion.
Yeah, there is that communal understanding. It used to be you were sort of whatever you were when you were born and you lived in a small community and you lived there your whole life. I came from a place where just about everybody was Lutheran. Yep.
We had-
A few Catholics dabbled in that.
We allowed a few Catholics.
here?
You also had more than one Lutheran church too.
Oh, there were how many? 4 Lutheran, it was a town of 1,500 people and there were 4 Lutheran churches.
Wow.
I'm not kidding.
Like Wobegon.
Yeah, it was. It really was. Somebody told me one time, "You're from Boston. You look like you're from Boston." What is it?
We had a look about us, didn't we?
Is it inbreeding or something? Probably. All right, so why do we want to study religion? Okay, we talked about the very great significance it has in world events and current affairs and the lives of people. It's central to the lives of most people. If you talk just general spirituality, studies of Americans say that about 90% of people believe in God in some way, believe in some kind of an ultimate reality. Loosely defined in many cases, tightly defined in others, but yeah, that's really a high number of people. I think religion is interesting to study. It's the thing that interests me more than anything in my life, except probably my kids. Studying religious traditions other than one's own can reduce a tendency toward bias and prejudice. Religious understanding can provide meaning to life. Religious study, spiritual study can open up the mystery of life. It describes the universe and fills it with meaning, more meaning-filled lives. Religion supports a social order, can support a social order. It can also destroy a social order. Teaches us how to live and behave. You think about it, there has been many times historically, in many places still today, where a class like this would not be possible. Think about it. People of different traditions coming together to discuss other traditions openly and without fear. Inviting people to a synagogue, people being willing and, we're so lucky, aren't we? Mm-hmm. To live where we do.
Yeah.
So values of religion, of practicing it. I think we've talked about most of them. Another one is that you've read these studies, it's good for physical health. People who practice a religious tradition regularly are healthier on the whole. It's also good for stress reduction and better mental health. So you want to be healthy? Find a tradition and practice it. Also, personal transformation can occur through spiritual practice. Help in dealing with big questions. I certainly see that when people are dying. Very often when I work with people and they find out what I do, they'll say, no, I don't believe in any of that, I'm not religious. And I'll say, well, tell me what you don't believe in. So they tell me what they don't believe in. And then I say, tell me what brings meaning to your life. What brings you hope? What brings you joy? That's your spirituality. It's your kids, nature, whatever it is. That's, to me, a route to spirituality in this idea of connection as much as a religious tradition for many people.
I gotta go, Gail.
You have to go. Goodbye, Peggy.